What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 95 of Bettin N Boozin here on the HHH Racing Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Roscoe, back from Vegas, fresh and ready to go. Hopefully, you guys are ready for a really good show tonight as we cover Alabama Stakes Day at Saratoga Racecourse this Saturday, August 17th. Welcome, everybody. Hopefully, you guys are all doing well. We'll do the intro pretty quick here, and we'll get right into the podcast. Of course, as you see scrolling on the bottom side of the screen as it goes by, please go down below the video player here on YouTube. Please hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. It's the easiest and best way to help out our channel because not only is it 100% completely free, it shows us that you guys are liking the content and pushes these videos out into the YouTube algorithm to hopefully bring like-minded horse players like yourself to the HHH Racing Podcast. And of course, for that, we thank you. Also scrolling by right now on the bottom side of the screen, you'll see our next show is tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern with Howard, Pete, and Paul talking King's Plate Day at Woodbine. Their best day of the entire summer is going to be a fantastic card over there as well. So make sure to tune in tomorrow night here on the YouTube, on the HHH Racing Podcast YouTube channel, or onto X at AP Roscoe K for me, or for Howard at H Kravitz. So please tune in tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern for that. Of course, every single podcast here on the HHH Racing Podcast YouTube channel is also available in audio form, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. For those, please go rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Saratoga and Del Mar Power Picks, guys, are still available on a week-by-week basis. Noah with the Del Mar Power Picks here on from Bettin N Boozin is racking up wins every single week, including 2 out of 3, I believe, on Sunday. He can correct me if I'm wrong, including Fandom at a very nice price on Sunday at Del Mar. So they continue to roll in, especially including Saratoga Power Picks as well. So please, actually, no, Fandom was at Saratoga, excuse me. That was for Sunday, but Noah also wrote those on Sunday, so he still gave that out at a nice price. So please go to hhhracingpodcast.com. You can see it on the screen right there now. And you can see previous editions of our Power Picks before you want to buy them or just want to learn more about us, also on hhhracingpodcast.com. But also, if you go to the Power Picks tip sheet tab on the top of the website and you click there, it'll take you right into the Saratoga and Del Mar Power Picks section. They are done through PayPal or through Venmo. PayPal, you must have a PayPal account, but you can use credit card, debit card, whatever you want to be able to pay. And if you're already a subscriber to our normal Power Picks, patreon.com/HHH Racing Podcast for those, $4 a weekend, 2 full tracks, you will get a discount off of the Saratoga or Del Mar Power Picks. But yeah, $15.99 a month for our normal Power Picks, guys. You get 2 full tracks every single Saturday, price play, spot plays, pick 5 grids, everything you need to be successful on any given Saturday. We got you covered at the HHH Racing Podcast. Again, patreon.com/HHH Racing Podcast for that. But guys, we'll get right into it here as we have a very, very good sequence to cover, highlighted, of course, by the Grade 2 Lake Placid Stakes and the Grade 1 Alabama. So bring on my co-host right now, then we'll go through the chat real quick and get right into the show. Full house again for you guys today from the East Coast of New Jersey, Patrick Kunsel, from the Ohio State University, Charlie Freeman, and University of Kentucky, Noah Maher. Boys, what's going on?
I see no hat from Noah, so I guess more confidence now. Are we embracing it?
What's starting to grow out a little bit. Hey, Kyle, when you were talking about the picks, it sounds like I just pick winners wherever. Is that what you're getting at?
It's kind of crazy how it doesn't even have to be you. No, it's kind of crazy how wherever we do the Power Picks, it seems to have winners come galore. Charlie had 3 out of 4 price plays one weekend. Noah had 2 out of 3, including Fandom. Like I said, was at 8-1 or something like that. So again, just great prices all around. So well worth your money for only $4 or $5 in addition. So please go again, hhhracingpodcast.com for those. But guys, like I said, we'll get right into it. We'll see who's here. Of course, Katie was here, best part of the day. Appreciate it, Katie. Thanks so much for joining in. Nice and early. Jim Pillars, of course, is here, says hello, Katie. Mark Bogas says, love the hard work you gents put into the pod. Always come away with a few valuable nuggets. Also love the comments on the feed. Let's start boozing. I'm sure you can hear it in my face. Mark still trying to recover from that bachelor party a little bit. Got a little bit of a stuffy nose now at this point. So the water will be flowing tonight, but hopefully you guys got something in your hands. let's hear some Vegas stories, Jim. We'll get there in a second throughout the show. Matt Miller, of course, let's go. Hi, everyone. Terry Frank is here. Ed Burke is here. Paul Conlon is here, of course. Thank you guys all for joining the show. If you guys are here on YouTube, please comment in the live chat. It's on the right side of the screen, down below, just next to the video player. And if you have any comments on these races that they've been out for a while now, please put them in the live chat. We would love to hear. So, guys, let's get right into it here. And starts in race number 8 on Saturday, August 17th. It is actually a pretty good race as well. A lot of these are very tough. It's a $110,000 allowance race going a mile and 1/8 on the dirt. Draws a full field of 10. And I'll bring up the Equibase right now so you guys can take a look at the morning lines and the field. Morning line favorite is on all the way to the outside, the number 10, Timeout for Joel Rosario, and Bill Mott, second choice, right to his inside. Donegal Surges, Irad hops aboard for Pletcher at 3-1. Third choice, the number 6, Rocketeer. Gaffleone rides for Brad Cox. And bringing up our picks right now, as you see that 3 of the guys are going with Timeout. I am the lone man out, going with the number 6, Rocketeer. And funny enough, I had Timeout on top for the longest time, so we would have been in agreement if I didn't end up switching, but I did end up going with Rocketeer in this race. Patrick, I'll let you go first since you are right to my right. And you guys all have, so you guys can obviously touch on anything that Patrick does and you want to touch on. What'd you like most about the number 10 Timeout for Bill Mott in this race?
Yeah, so I mean, Timeout, I look 2 back. Timeout, I look 2 back. And, oh boy.
Yeah, we're getting the teacher jokes early and we're not even 10 minutes into the podcast.
Hey, I heard somebody starts school tomorrow, so no, that's the boss. But, listen, I look 2 back, when this horse broke its maiden, and that field was very well meant. And, then I look into Curlin. I mean, that horse, you knew who was winning that race, but Timeout kept on in that race and kept going. And now, comes into this race working, very well. I mean, I know, we talk about workouts here and there, but you could obviously see that they've been very strong. The mile and 1/8, I don't think should be a problem at all, considering he's already won there at that distance. Bill Mott's been doing very well up here, which doesn't surprise. Sire Curlin, who I know Mr. Halloran probably is going to be on top of this horse as well. I don't know if Noah and Charlie have anything else to kind of hit on with Timeout, but I mean, I think this horse, if we could get 5-2, I'll be putting a nice win bet on this horse.
Is that anyone else? Go ahead, touch on it.
Yeah, I mean, what I would just say, I mean, I will say also, Kyle, I love where you went with Rocketeer. I know this was a horse I was very interested in last time out. I was actually the opposite of you. I had Rocketeer on top the whole time, and then right before I sent it to you, I said I'd put my bias aside and put who I believe is the best horse. And what I really like about Timeout is I just think he's sort of a talented enough horse that he can make his own trip. I think if the pace is more, of a slower down pace, I think he'll have no issue sitting closer to the speed and be within a length or two. And I think if they are going quicker, he's one that can afford to sit, 3-4 lengths back and still be close enough. Obviously that bullet work on August 11th, and Bill Mott, I wouldn't say is exactly one who's known for cranking them. So for me, that's just more so another positive sign about how ready this horse is. Again, I know I normally like to mess around and, make some mean joke about Joel Rosario, but the reality is I know he is usually a very solid jockey, and I watched that race last time out, and I thought he rode the horse just fine. Just wasn't the best horse on that day, but the consistency is there. I think this horse is continuing to improve, and I just think personally, and I'm wondering, if this was your thought, I just think he'll end up getting a great trip and be put in a good spot.
Yeah, I think he very well could. I think there might be a little more speed on paper than maybe Timeform suggests. At least I think, which I could see Timeout getting a pretty good trip. As long as Rosario doesn't have him too far back. This is a bigger field than he's been facing, so I think Rosario's got to get him a little bit closer than maybe he has been. I think where they have him on Timeform is probably pretty accurate, but you guys kind of touched on it with Timeout. He's kind of he's a slow progressing horse, and he seems to be getting better with every start. Last time in the Curlin, he lost to Unmatched Wisdom, who I think we're going to see in a marquee 3-year-old race here coming up. I guess the only knock would be that outside post, but again, there should be a decent amount of speed, so I think it could set up for him. And I'm with you guys, Kyle and Charlie. I liked Rocketeer. The horse that beat him, Moore's Law, ran a race that we had never even seen anything close to him. So I thought Rocketeer pretty much ran a winning race and did all the dirty work. And another one that's just improving for Brad Cox, and Tyler Gaffleon gets to ride for his father-in-law again for E5.
Yeah,
correct. And you hit on why I like Rocketeer over Timeout. The one thing I was concerned about was the post position. Mile and an eighth, obviously, there's not too much run up to the first turn. They start about that finish line, obviously with a little bit of run up. But he's a horse that wants to be towards that mid pack. And you have horses like Game Warden who want to occupy the same space to his inside. You have Donegal Surges, who's not going to be slow. And Django's probably slower than all three of those that I just talked about. Then you have Rocketeer. You mentioned there might be a little bit more pace signed on. Bank Frenzy has been quick, but has been quick at the mile, so probably will go out there. I don't know how quick Digital Ops actually is. Dylan Davis had him basically riding, obviously, a Golden Aqueduct rail that day. Hustled him to the rail, got him to the rail, and obviously just stayed up by a head the entire time. I'm not too sure how good Digital Ops actually is. So my thought was that Digital Ops was going to kind of sit in behind, maybe not be as fast as the other two. The one thing that I was, and you also hit on about Rocketeer, was the fact that Tyler hops back aboard, and he's getting better. He's progressively getting better every stride. They put the blinkers on, and then that last race, I thought he ran an absolute winning race. And that last time he was 3 wide on the first, he was 3 wide the entire way around. And, finally towards the end of the final turn, that's when he finally was able to corral 2 wide. That whole time, they were stacked 4 across the track the entire time. So I thought he ran a great race that day, just losing to Moore's Law, who ended up coming over the top, taking advantage of that aforementioned pace scenario. So I think if Rocketeer gets that type of, second pressing trip over a horse like, the 4 Bank Frenzy, who might not be as good as a horse like Rocketeer, who's lightly raced, now steadily improving. If he can, step up with that equipment change, the better trip, and the ever increasing buyers, I just thought Rocketeer could be prime for a really good low 90s buyer and beat a horse who's going to be, pretty heavily bet, like Timeout. But again, like I said, I had Timeout on top the entire time. I completely get it. I think he's probably the most likely winner as long as he gets a good trip from that post in the mile and an eighth. I have Donegal Surges in third. So do you, Noah. Real quick, we can touch on him. That last race was good behind a really nice horse in Drake's Passage, although Drake's Passage came back to run. He might still be running. I'm not too sure. He got drew in to an optional claiming after the Brooklyn and did absolutely no running at 2 to 5. But that last race still was good. Got a good number of 93. And he's not a 1 number horse. He ran a 90 before at Aqueduct going shorter. I just don't, I don't know if this horse wants a mile and an eighth. This will be kind of the test. But Bernardini Mare Candy Ride definitely fits breeding wise. It's just the fact that this horse will most likely be bet for Pletcher and IRAD. And I have to see that he can run the mile and an eighth before I take him at that price.
Yeah, I respect him. I'd never bet him to win. Last time, I guess you could say he sort of got the mile and an eighth, but it was a pretty tepid pace up front. It was a muddy track, and that time form number of 122 is much better than anything else he's ever run. So for me, it's a little bit of a vibe of I kind of have to see it again. And he hadn't really gone 2 turns, let alone done it well before that.
Yeah.
So, you make a good point. A horse that's going to be low price that I don't necessarily trust. But if I'm playing a horizontal ticket, I'm definitely going to include.
Yeah, like you said, respect, but not betting on the win end, but, can win as long as he gets up to the distance. And the other horse I kind of mentioned a little bit, actually, is Bank Frenzy. Charlie, I'll let you talk about Patrick, touch on anything you want real quick, and then we'll move on to the next race. But you guys have both have Bank Frenzy in third, newly trained by Rudy Rodriguez for LSU Stables.
Yeah, I'll let Pat touch on it too. But for me, the main thing I thought was interesting is, I obviously am not typically a speed horse kind of person, especially in these distances. And, as Noah and I touched on as well with why we like Timeout is, at least to us, there's more speed than maybe time form is indicating. What I do like is there is still some versatility. There are races where the 4 actually has been able to run decently off the pace. And while I understand, that the level when you're seeing like these optional claimings is kind of low, I think the buyers are actually pretty accurate, because when I went back to watch the replays, I personally was impressed with what I saw. Especially, last time out where they weren't going slow, 23-2, and then under 47 for the half is with this horse on the lead, and then wins going away. I just think this is one who I don't know if this horse is necessarily ready for quite this big of a step up, but I also know that, Rudy isn't someone to really go off the claim and throw a horse in this spot if he doesn't think the horse has a chance. So to me, I think this is one that at the very least could be, I know we talk about cheap speed, but I think this one could actually be decent speed that just hangs on long enough to finish in the money.
And Patrick, real quick, someone Mark pointed it out in the chat. 125 pounds carried by the 4 as compared to someone like Rocketeer, who's carrying 118 pounds. And I know we don't usually talk about weight on the shows. It's not something I take into too much consideration, but 7 pounds in the grand scheme of things, that can definitely weigh a horse down at 1 1/8. No pun intended, obviously.
Yeah, having a little too much dessert like I am, I guess. I mean, I don't really know. No,
You
but
and me both, man.
I agree with everything Charlie said, so I won't really say too much. But I don't think this is really cheap speed. Sometimes I hate to kind of say this, but like sometimes you get a Rudy Rodriguez horse that is just going to go to the lead and fade. I'm not so sure that that Bank Frenzy can't stay on the lead and hold them going pretty long in this spot. We'll have to obviously get a little bit faster, but this is one of those salty allowance fields that we love to start out a pick 5.
Absolutely. And so when you're looking at it, you're like, oh wait, that horse can win. Wait, that horse can win too. So can that one. And you just go back down the line and it gets like that. But either way, boys, we're all pretty similar, which I thought was actually really interesting. Noah and I and Patrick and Charlie both have the same top 3. I'm going 6-10-9. Patrick's going 10-6-4. Charlie's also going 10-6-4. Noah's going 10-6-9. Guys, moving on to race number 9. It's the co-feature on the card. It's the Grade 2 Lake Placid Stakes, and I'll switch the Equibase right now and get these morning lines on the screen for you guys. A really, really nice field of 11, headlined by the number 7, the very talented Cherie DeVoe runner. She Feels Pretty for John Velasquez at 2-1. Second choice all the way to the outside. Beautiful Love for Manny Franco and Charlie Appleby at 4-1. Third choice being the number 10, Dynamic Pricing, a favorite for the host of this show at 6-1. And I'll bring up the picks right now, guys. And we have some very, very interesting ones coming in here and some very strong opinions to boot. I am going with She Feels Pretty. Charlie's going with me as well on She Feels Pretty, but 2 of the men on the screen here are going with the number 5. And as you guys notice, I didn't say the 5 in talking about the favoritism. You're looking at Spaladay at 12-1 on the morning line. Noah, I'll let you talk first. Patrick, feel free to go into anything that you need. But since Patrick talked first last time, Noah, I'll let you go first now. But he said 12-1, fantastic price on a Chad Brown. Frankie Dettori picks up the ride.
Yeah, I personally love the price. This was a horse that I think in her second start, we were all up there for the Grade 1 gamble, and this was a horse that was a lot of people's plays, or kind of what they keyed in on, just because in her debut she showed so much promise. She broke terribly, and then she was flying on the outside, and then when she came to Keeneland, she was less than even money, and unfortunately didn't run very well. But she came back and broke her maiden. Then she ran the mile at Saratoga, where she was a favorite and ran fine. The last race is the race that I'm keen in on. She ran in the listed stake at Monmouth. She was a 3-horse in that race. She actually came from last, but it was only a 6-horse field, and she looked comfortable the entire time. But once they got to the top of the stretch, Sammy Camacho just tapped her a couple of times on the hip, and she just exploded. I mean, he really only had to tap her on the hip maybe once or twice, and then pretty much hand rid her the entire time. Kind of just galloped out through the wire. I thought that was very visually impressive. And I like the price at 12-1. Looks very appetizing for the other Chad in a graded stake at Saratoga. So there's a lot to like about Spaladay. I guess I'll throw it to you, Pat, because I guess we're gonna have to play a ticket in some regard in this race.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you hit on everything that I was going to talk about, especially looking at that last race, gets the blinkers for the first time too. that was impressive. And you look at Chad. He seemed to do pretty good in this race. This is one of those races he kind of keys in on. Whether with any connections, honestly. But you look at Regal Glory with Peter Brandt and stuff like that. Yeah, I thought I was going to get kind of cute with Spaladay here at 12-1. I mean, this horse I've always kind of keyed in on. He seemed to be well meant all the way, the whole time, and then kind of third time out wins. Sometimes you question that. How good is this horse going to be? But I think we're getting this horse at the right time. I'm just hoping the secret's not out after this show's over, and I guess we don't want too many people watching this. But
Wow.
no, I'm kidding. No, but Kyle and Charlie, I know you guys could talk about Feels Pretty, who's obviously very well meant. And I mean, she's coming in, in pretty good form, facing some pretty stiff competition last out.
Yeah, and Charlie, I'll throw it to you. I have Spaladay in third. Just pointing out, I think she definitely has a chance in this race. I just don't know if she'll get the pace setup that she needs against these type of horses. I think it's a pretty big step up for her. But if you're talking about getting her at the right time, the double digits odds is definitely where you want a horse like Spaladay, who, if she does run a big one, that again, the price would be right. So I completely agree with you guys on that regard. But Charlie, I'll show the time for him as well, man. I mean, the first time out since the Breeders' Cup, granted, against, maybe not the best competition, the Hilltop at Pimlico on Preakness Day, but then comes back in the Belmont Oaks, loses only by 3/4 to Cinderella's Dream, who came back and, granted, in a small field, but ran absolutely fantastic again. Just one of the top horses, and obviously being part of the Cerritos Van Club. If she gets the trip, I think she's very, very the horse to beat in this race.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the big issue, I mean, for starters, I do want to point out for this race, to me, at least, this is, I don't know about you guys, I feel like this is such a loaded field for a grade 2. I just think there's so much talent. And there's a lot of horses in this field that I have connections to. No one knows very well. Spaladay was a horse that I absolutely loved two back, and I was just wrong about. I think the big issue with this race is this seems like the Charlie Freeman Stakes in a race to just tempt me to lose money, because it's a bunch of closers in a distance race where I would love to pick like half of the field and go with them, but I just know there's not enough pace, and this is me just going with the mature angle. Now, granted, I also just love She Feels Pretty. I think she's an ultra talented horse, and I just think there's too many closers in this race, to be honest with you. I think she's going to be towards the front. There's not going to be much speed to compete with. Those who are forwardly placed, I just think quite bluntly, are nowhere near as good as her. And I think a lot of the major talent and players are closers. I think she's going to be way too far ahead of this field. I think they're going to have too much to do in a race this short. Not that it's that short, but nonetheless too short for them. And I think she ends up getting the jump on the cheap speed and ends up winning pretty convincingly. And maybe I'm wrong, and that's just a bad beat. But that was at least my angle. I will go into the 11, my second choice. So obviously, naturally, I had to look into the 2 euros that were shipping in. And personally, for me, I know it was only a 92 on time form, which isn't amazing because we talk about the knock you have to take down. But whenever you see a Godolphin horse in an Appleby, you have to pay attention. And when I watched that replay, to me personally, I know it was an allowance overseas, but I was super impressed. I mean, it looked like literally Buick was never even asking. Beautiful Love just decided to romp away, and he didn't really have to do anything. As soon as he started to want her to go, he just stopped asking. And I think she could maybe, I mean, obviously it'll depend on the ride that Manny Franco is instructed to give, but I think if she chooses to sit a little bit closer, like she did in that race, and kind of get the jump again on these other speed ones, she could be the one closest as She Feels Pretty and give her trouble. I just think the big question is obviously stepping up from the allowance races that she's run good in compared to the stakes race that didn't go quite as well. This is still going to be a jump, and it just depends how ready she is, but this is one I wouldn't ignore. And I'll let you talk about the 10, Kyle. I know you love this horse. For me, I think the only question that you might have too is there enough pace for her to close into?
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have said it better. Also, as She Feels Pretty, I completely agree with you. I mean, this is the quintessential get the jump horse on a lot of these others, as you talked about. Against Spaladay, against dynamic pricing, the Euros. A lot of these horses that are going to be farther back, and you have a horse you have She Feels Pretty, who's ultra talented in her own right, going to be sitting right behind the speed, basically getting that same type of trip that she got in the Hilltop, maybe even the Belmont Oaks. I think she was a little bit closer than she wanted to be in that race. But again, just exactly the trip that I think she wants, she's going to get, and she should get the jump on a lot of others and be able to last more than a lot of these horses. No, I want to talk with you about the Beautiful Love, because I see you also don't have her anywhere. And I want to point out a few things. Obviously, it's Appleby Godolphin. This horse will be bet, and I think honestly she's too slow to be able to run with horses like this. But again, Appleby has done it before, yada yada yada. But dynamic pricing is exactly what Charlie mentioned. I know I have a soft spot for this horse. Picked this horse at almost 9-1 on the Edgewood at Churchill Downs on Kentucky Oaks Day. All that love, and I had $50 to win on her. All that love, and then just get flattened by the Grizzly Bear in the Kentucky Oaks because I was that wrong in that race as usual. But if she has pace, she will run well. I just don't know if this is the type of race that will give her that setup. I think she's going to run well, maybe be second, third. Definitely a horse you want to play underneath in this race, in my opinion. But on the win end, I'm just not so sure that she'll get that pace set up in this race. Noah, I'm going to show the time form numbers because we talk about, comparing time forms to buyers. You'll see She Feels Pretty ran a 122 time form in that comeback race off of the layoff. Spaladay last race ran a 111 to pair with her 110 35 days before that. And you look at Beautiful Love. I mean, that last race was a 93. I mean, that's 30 time form points that this horse has to improve just based on rating. I mean, if there's anyone that can do it, it's Appleby, but that's a gigantic step up for a horse that's going to probably be like 7-2 in this race, 3-1.
Yeah, and I think normally those Urals will kind of improve their time form when they come over.
Naturally, right? Yeah.
So yeah. But still, I think a little bit on the slow side. And there were just so many horses in here that I, considered that I thought this race, if it's not She Feels Pretty, I think it could be anybody.
Yeah.
For those of you who are, reading the form and looking at the 11 Beautiful Love, you go, oh, why is Buick or, Pratt, somebody not on? Why is Manny Franco on? Well, I wondered that myself. So I did a little research, and looks like Manny Franco's only ridden for Appleby one time. Let me pull that up.
In the last 5 years,
He's
right?
only ridden one time in the last
right
5 years for a horse with the name of Althika. That was back in 2021, and she actually won the Diana, which was a grade 1 with a 102 buyer. So if you're too worried about that, look into that and use that as you will. But just others I thought that were more interesting at a price, and it's Godolphin, like Charlie said, so they're going to naturally get bet.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you by any means. Obviously going to step up her numbers a little bit. And I agree with you that, these Euros come over, they naturally tend to run better and run better numbers in these types of races in the States. But it was a little too much for me of a jump to be able to run, 30 points higher at a tenth of the price of her numbers that she needs to improve. But can definitely win. Obviously, I'm not saying that. Look, Appleby can win pretty much anything that he wants to in these states, as long as he has the right horse to do it with. Just not too sure if this is the right one today, especially like Noah said, there's a lot of contenders in here that you can make a case for, and some at much better prices than, 7-2, 3-2-1. Guys, let's move on. I'm going 7-10-5. Pat's going 5-11-7. Charlie's going 7-11-10. Noah's going 5-7-10. Guys, we'll move on to race number 10, and this is the Grade 1 Alabama Stakes. It's the feature on the card, and again, a smaller field, but a pretty good field in that of 3-year-old fillies. Obviously missing the big one in Torpedo Anna, but she has bigger fish to fry the next weekend, as we will talk about, of course, on this podcast. Field of 8 in this race, headed by the morning line, by a pretty heavy morning line favorite in the number 7 Candide for Manny Franco and Todd Pletcher. And I'll put our picks up on the screen right now. Two of us are going with the aforementioned Candide, Patrick and Charlie on top. I am going with the number 6, Miss Justify, the other Pletcher, ridden by Flavian Pratt. Noah's actually going a little bit off, going Chris Landeros, Ian Wilkes, just basking the number 4 at 5-2-1. But I'll let the boys talk about the morning line favorite first. And especially since coming back after the layoff, Pat, Charlie, she hasn't done really anything wrong. Obviously ran in the Ashland. That was real tough. Lost to a really good Leslie's Rose that day, and then absolutely flattened them at Monmouth last time, and then losing Torpedo Anna. So not too much, she hasn't done too much wrong since coming back.
Yeah, the only thing honestly that she's done wrong is having to run into Torpedo Anna and just instead of just trying to avoid that fight altogether to take on horses that she can beat. But with that being said, like you've touched on, essentially it sort of seems like she can beat anyone except for Torpedo Anna, which is a common problem for these young fillies, unless they happen to run, like a career number like Leslie's Rose did in that race at Keeneland. So for me, I just didn't want to get creative. I know we like to look for prices. I know people were talking about, which is fair, that now that the Grizzly Bear's not in here, it's more open, which it is. But I'm also not just going to ignore what I see visually and also with what the program shows. And Candide, for me, just as you said, hasn't really done anything wrong. I think she's just going to get another good trip. I think she's the best horse in this field. And I think she'll kind of get to prove, when she's not facing the actual best in the division, that make a very strong argument that she's the number 2. Didn't get creative here. But I know I'll let Patrick talk a little more on it, but I'm happy you have Miss Justify in second because I would love to hear more why you like that horse, because she was the only one to me that really stood out as the main threat if the favorite gets upset.
Yeah, I'll leave that to Kyle because he seems to have her on top, so he's got some explaining to do there. No, I do like her. I think she's interesting too. No, listen, I mean, this horse, she ran her heart out in the Coaching Club American Oaks. Manny tried to, engage with Torpedo Anna earlier than, probably expected, but that was the only way, hoping Torpedo Anna was just going to kind of run out of steam, which wasn't going to happen. So then you look, at that Monmouth race, she ran amazing against, an interesting field, and everything else was pretty much a grade 1 in her breaking her maiden. So listen, I just think she should sit a nice stalking trip. Manny should have her in the perfect spot, and she should just pounce on these horses. I'm not really sure what the pace dynamic is going to be. I guess Miss Justify is probably going to go to the lead. I'm not sure what you would like to see from her, Kyle, but I think, she's one of a couple that can go to the lead in here.
I mean, and Timeform agrees with you. Timeform has Miss Justify on the lead. Honestly, I think she'll sit a nice pressing trip to the number 2, Chatalis. I think it's Chatalis. And we talked about her at length on this show, and someone had her on top at a very nice price of 10-1 that day in the Indiana Oaks. I don't know who it is, but it's like Beetlejuice. You mentioned his name 3 times. All of a sudden he shows up. But I think Chatalis, especially running shorter, I think is going to go to the lead, especially off that last race. Dettori has the ride for Mark Glatt. And I've Miss Justify sits kind of that same trip she sat in that Churchill Downs race. I understand she went a mile that day, but I think that's the type of trip that she would do very well with. Flavian Pratt, obviously, probably could ride a donkey in some of these races that they run on the weekends and probably get that donkey home for at least second place. So going through the family tree of Miss Justify, I want to talk about real quick. Try to remember who's the grand dam of, obviously, the mare of the dam. So she was running in these longer 1.125 races, and still running 1.5 at Keeneland. Granted, didn't run too well, but was meant for those longer distances for Graham Motion. Majestic Perfection was a sprinter, but Stage Magic was running these, dirt routes. Granted, 1.16. Justify is no stranger to winning these 1.25 up races, winning at 18%, 6 for 32 in the marathon distances, and on dirt routes, 31 for 222, turf routes, 44 for 304. So has started over 525 horses at that routing distance. So I think Miss Justify honestly only gets better with distance. Could get run down from someone like Candide. I could definitely see that. But I just think if Miss Justify sits that type of trip, pressing, another one that might get a jump on a horse like Candide and be able to hold her off coming down the lane, as we've seen it before with Candide. She runs her race, but doesn't necessarily get there. Granted, has been against horses like Leslie's Rose and Torpedo Anna, but still, hopefully, a lightly raced filly, now only getting better coming into the summer here at Saratoga, can do exactly that, run that kind of low 90s, should be good enough to win this race. But Noah, I'll go to you, man. I agree with the chat. Christopher says that that was Miss Justify. Where's the one about Just Basking? He says Just Basking will relish the 1.25. We saw her break her maiden at 1.25, Noah, and she did it very, very well. So yeah, you got to assume that distance should be no problem for her.
Yeah, it looks like Just Basking can probably run all day. I mean, like you said, if anyone's going to relish this mile and a quarter, I think it's going to be her. Is she the best horse in the race? Probably not. But again, I don't think a lot of these horses will love going 10 furlongs or 9 furlongs or whatever it is. Just Basking is just, a little bit of a fresh face. We've kind of seen what some of these 3-year-old fillies can do. And, that they're okay. They haven't done anything spectacular, but Just Basking is kind of an up and comer. She seems like she's getting better with every start. I know the Iowa Oaks, she didn't really beat much, but she was in last and she made kind of like a 4 or 5 wide move and, did it impressively. I thought. I know it's Chris Landeros, who's somebody you can't really trust. But it's not a strong opinion. I'll go with Just Basking. It's probably Candide or Move On, but it's a little weird thing with these 3-year-old fillies where they get beat by Torpedo Anna, and it's like they get the life sucked out of them. Like they just can't run back to what they're capable of. And maybe that's the case with Candide. I know she ran her heart out last time, but maybe that's what it takes. It just takes that effort, just takes it out of them.
So are you denoting the flight line effect Torpedo Anna?
I mean, we saw when Just FYI tried to run with her. I mean, she's still running a couple months later. So, I mean, I can't take 7-5 on Candide. I'm sorry. So
I agree with you.
Just an alternative. It's not a strong opinion, but just someone to try to beat Candide.
No, and I mean, obviously in your boat, Candide, of course, can run very well and easily can win this race. Definitely the horse to beat, but I'm in the same thinking as Noah. That's kind of why I'm on. I've had Chattelis in third. I think I probably would be gravitating towards someone like Just Basking in this race. But Chattelis, if there is no pace on, is definitely one that can stay up there. But this is one that's going to need to improve. Obviously ran very well in the turf and ran very well off the layoff in the Indiana Oaks. But is going to have to show it at a mile and a quarter. Maybe not what she's suited for, but Gun Runner, Indian Charlie Mare could relish the extra distance into that route, but just complete pace play. Not too sure if there's that much pace gone, which is another reason why I'm not too sure if I'm going to like someone like Candide in this race. But again, most likely winner, I think for sure in this race. The only other horse we really haven't talked about is one that you guys have in third, is the number 3 Power Squeeze. Charlie, I'll let you talk about this one, then we can move on unless Noah has something quick to add. But this is one you've been following for a long time, one of your Mr. South Beach horses, Mr. South Beach specials, winning the Gulfstream Park Oaks, and obviously ran a nice one in the Delaware Oaks last time to just get up by a nose.
Yeah, I think Power Squeeze, this is one that obviously I don't know if she'll necessarily love the distance, but I also think personally, as long as it's not a sloppy track, I do think she's one of the ones that maybe won't mind it as much as others. And to be honest, she also just to me screams like a horse in these kinds of races that is one of your safest bets to potentially, finish in the money, but maybe one of the ones you feel less confident about actually having, that killer instinct to go and get the win. But I still think she's shown enough for me, obviously getting to drop down to that Delaware race, which still, was a grade 3 and got the job done. Still 2 back against Torpedo Anna, ran a decent third. It's just the reality is she's not on Torpedo Anna's level. And, I think Noah made a fair point. A lot of these horses have, after running into the Grizzly Bear, haven't really been the same, but at least we saw Power Squeeze ran a decent effort back out, and which to me also kind of felt more of like a setup to getting back to a race like this. And I thought she ran fine. So I just think this is one, and Noah, you can touch on a little more because you're the other one with Power Squeeze. I just think she's very solid and game enough that she can at least get up to finish in the money.
I don't disagree with. Well, go for it.
Power Squeeze is one of those that I feel like is just always disrespected. She won a grade 2 at 11-1, and then I think she was the longest price in the Acorn and got up for third. And she was a grade 2 winner in grade 1 place, and she wasn't even the favorite in the Delaware Oaks. I think Cinnamara was actually the favorite.
Yes, that's correct.
And then she went ahead and closed 2 lengths back into a 50-2 pace. So one that's just like super gritty and just one that always tries, someone that you have to include, I think, at least underneath.
I agree with you. And Ed Burke says the same thing. The 3 likes the fight, kind of that gritty type of horse, especially one you love to see in a nice filly. In the Alabama, I'm going 6-7-2 with Miss Justify on top. Patrick's going 6-7, 6-4. Charlie's going 7-6-3. Noah's going against the grain a little bit, 4-7-3 with Just Basking on top. Guys, final 2 races of the late pick 5 on Saturday are a really nice starter allowance race and a maiden special weight New York bred turf sprint, which is a fantastic way to end out the card. Race 11 is that aforementioned starter allowance race going 1 mile out of the Wilson chute with a field of 10. And I'll show the Equibase right now for you guys. Morning line favorite is the number 7 Unlimited Potential, coming off a ridiculous win last time off of a ridiculous drop for Junior Alvarado in the new barn of Mertan Contarmachi at 5-2. Second choice is the number 3 Yo Daddy for Jose Lascano, Linda Rice at 3-1. Third choice is the number 4 Who's the King, Gaff Leon rides for Safi Joseph Jr. And showing the picks right now, guys. 2 of us are going with the number 3 Yo Daddy in Patrick and Noah. Again, yeah, you guys got to do something on Saturday. I don't know what it is. You guys got to do something. Charlie's going with the number 7 Unlimited Potential in this race, the morning line favorite, which means he will go first. I'm going with the number 4 Who's the King. But Charlie, like I said, you will go first. What'd you like most about the favorite in this race, who's coming off of, not out of nowhere necessarily, but man, that race was interesting to say the least.
Yeah, no, that effort left me kind of just confused and in shock, really, just to see that the effort was that good. I mean, again, I know it was obviously a drop down, but for me, that was still just an absolutely ridiculous effort that personally I didn't exactly see coming. And I certainly thought and expected a rebound. And obviously, with the price that horse was going off at from that effort last time out, that was pretty brutal. But like you touched on, I mean, lost by a nose on debut at a high respectable second time out, a maiden special weight, ran a 93 on debut, and went off as the favorite. Kind of started off as more of a money burner, but then got the maiden finally broken at Keeneland. And again, you can see with these buyer numbers, there are still some respectable efforts. Ultimately, for me to just see, and they also, it's not like, you could see with the red numbers, they weren't exactly crawling going a mile. And Nathan, despite that, this horse romped going away. And I don't know, for me personally, just because of also how steep the drop was, I feel like this is one you'll get every bit of that 5-2, maybe even a little bit more. Also knowing that these aren't maybe the typical connections you're used to for the favorite. I still think the 3 is very threatening, and I know there's some support for the 3 in the chat. So I'll let you guys talk a little bit more about. I'll let Patrick talk a little bit more about the 3 or Noah. But I think Unlimited Potential is the horse to beat. But I will say I do think Yo Daddy, I believe that's the 3, right, is also very tough in this spot. I was kind of torn between those 2.
Go for it, boys. So Patrick, go ahead, talk first. Number 3, Yo Daddy, Linda Rice. Obviously, last race was very good against Game Warden, coming out of that same race as number 4, who I like, Who's the King.
Yeah. So a couple coming out of that race. I'll just touch on one thing with Unlimited Potential, and kind of the reason why I'm not going to go there. That was one of those stupid drops trying to find a win at Saratoga. I mean, it was blatantly obvious. Mike Rapoli was struggling early on, was trying to get a win. And listen, the horse, has talent, but
yeah,
I don't know. I just not a fan. I'd rather go with a horse like Yo Daddy, who quality horse. That 90 buyer, he was trying to get to Game Warden, who's quality horse. And I think we're seeing Game Warden earlier on in the sequence, actually, right in race 8, I believe.
I actually don't know, but I'll check that. Keep going, though. I'll check that.
You're right, Pat.
In the allowance race. Yeah, I should sit a stalking trip with Lascano, who's always usually like Linda's first or second call. I'm not really sure, what else you saw in this, Noah. You look at that race, the 5th race on July 27th, and you try and pick and choose here and there, because Who's the King was, pretty big favorite in that race. And, everybody kind of thought was going to go to the lead and just win going away. So this is an interesting spot.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who thought Who's the King was going to go to the lead.
I don't think the only
one that didn't think that was Tyler Gaffleon, but I'll move on. Yeah, with Yo Daddy, you touched on it. Ran a big effort July 27th. They were actually there, and I remember I was a little skeptical of Yo Daddy just because he was kind of in between surface changes. He had been on the dirt earlier in his career, but then he had run pretty well on the turf. I didn't know if he could kind of translate that late kick but I thought he ran really well. Game Warden was a very good winner that day, but Yo Daddy made like a wide 4 or 5 wide sweeping move, which you don't necessarily really see in these 2-turn races at Saratoga. So that was kind of the eye opener, which in some cases, when you jump up from like a 79 or 80 to a 90, it's like, well, I kind of want to see that again. But I think that effort was legit. And the blinkers might have this horse a little bit closer, so he doesn't have to do so much in the lane. I don't know about you, Kyle, with the 3-4 and the 4-3 exacta. You got Who's the King and Yo Daddy. So I'm rooting for a Who's Yo Daddy exacta.
Who's Yo Daddy? Yep, exactly. There we go. There's Noah's teacher joke of the day. This is the time form has 7 going to the lead, who is that aforementioned unlimited potential. Number 1, Smilemon, who was touched on by Chuck Brower in the chat. Speed from the inside out of the shoe, 12-1 for me. 4, Who's the King, sitting just off of those 2. And Noah hit it on the head. I have no idea why this horse didn't. This horse was complete lone speed on paper. And I called them after this race and I was like, what the was that? What was that? So I'm really hoping that Tyler and Safi learned that this horse is not one for that. And he did have trouble, but he kind of made his own trouble in that race by not going to the lead. He was steady to the first turn, kind of got, it says impeded in the notes. It wasn't that. I mean, wasn't that bad. Took a little bit of momentum off, and then Gaffleone decided to wrap him up. I'm hoping that he gets towards the lead in this race, and if he does get just sitting right off the lead like he did in that 100K optional at Churchill Downs, granted at a high price, but losing to Elephant's Ear, I think this is one that he can definitely relish at that mile distance, where I think he is actually a little bit better, where he won at the maiden, granted optional claiming level of Gulfstream, but won by 7 1/4 and has been going longer ever since. And maybe that's not what the horse wants to do. So I'm taking one more shot here with Who's the King, as long as they actually send this horse to the lead and don't make his own trouble. But again, that's easier said than done, at least on the handicapping side. But at least we're all semi, in the same type of place here. The only horse we haven't talked about is Have You Heard? Noah has in third. I'm a poet and I didn't know it, but Noah, these last, the 2 efforts before that is the kind of what you're keying on. Obviously a little bit slow on paper, but for underneath could definitely get in. I mean, at least at double digits, and IRAD hops aboard again.
Yeah, I think I just realized this. My top 3 are all coming out of the same race on July 27th. And this was a horse that actually did send to the lead, which I guess IRAD was probably instructed to do that. And it didn't work out very well, but it looks like this horse is better with a target. You look at 2 back, even though that was taken off the turf, it was a pretty decent effort. And then actually the maiden breaker, it took him a while to get in the winner's circle. But once he did, he's run pretty well since, other than that last race. I mean, he was 7-2 in that race. So he was liked by the public. And I think 10-1 is a little ridiculous for Maker and IRAD. I assume that'll probably get bet down maybe 6-8-1 if I had to guess. Host fail.
Unlucky. It's because I'm freaking coughing into the microphone. I'm sure no one wants to hear that. Sorry, guys. Have you heard? I think people are just going to key in on those last 2 races. I agree with you, Noah. 75 is a little slow in this race, so maybe you will end up getting somewhere in the high singles. But I mean, who's your daddy? Yo Daddy ran a 90 last race. Who's the King is on 85, 87 range. So I think maybe a little slow, but at least underneath is definitely one to look to as well. I'm going 4-3-7 in race 11. Pat's going 3-7-4. Charlie's going 7-3-4. Noah's going 3-4-6. Guys, moving into the last race, and it's everybody's favorite. Say it with me. Turf sprints, ladies and gentlemen. State-bred turf sprints, nonetheless. Going 5.5 furlongs on the outer Melon turf course at Saratoga, and I'll show the field here in 1 second once this loads. Field of main body field of 10 in this race, with a pretty heavy with 2 pretty heavy morning line favorites, honestly, in this race. Number 5, Beautiful Thief Castellano for George Weaver, and the number 3, Heart of the Night Manny Franco for Horacio De Paz at 2-1. Third choice is shared between the number 6, Naughty Destiny Dylan Davis for Christophe Clement, and number 8, Barefoot Disco Pratt rides for Charlie Baker. And I'll pull up the picks right now. No, both Noah and I are going with that morning line favorite, Beautiful Thief. Patrick's going with the number 6, Naughty Destiny, and Charlie is going with the other favorite in this race, the 2-1 Heart of the Night. We'll go first, Noah, since we have the morning line favorite. Number 5, Beautiful Thief, last time ran a very good race, and out of a pretty good race that held up off of Belmont Stakes Day. Gets a little time off, has been working pretty much ever since that race, and now comes back in this spot. Looks to me like if George Weaver can get over that 1 for 23 hump, I think she's going to be pretty tough in this one.
Yeah, I think the key is the break. If she breaks, I think it might be over in the first half a furlong. On debut, I thought it was a really solid effort. Got to the lead and went pretty fast, and it was heads up with another horse. I forgot who, but ran fine. Kind of put that horse away at the top of the stretch and opened it up by a length. But just kind of had done the dirty work at that point. And there's been 2 next out winners, I believe, in the end who didn't run very well in that race, but still came back and won.
That was the horse that was on the lead, Noah.
Yeah, and then Strictly Taboo came back, and I actually think rattled off 2 wins.
Yep, correct.
So a horse that keeps on getting better. It's not a creative pick. This horse will probably be even money or maybe less. But I just think if she breaks, she should show improvement second time. If she gets the lead, I think she's going to be pretty tough.
I agree with you completely. I mean, I got nothing to add. With the break is obviously the big key, and obviously you guys, I'm not with the late pick 5, but look at the board. This is one race that can share a lot of intel on who may be live, who's not. Purse Thief, or Dialed In, excuse me. Purse Thief is my horse who runs the same type of distance, is a winner at the 5.5 furlong distance on turf. Courageous Angel is another good sprinting dam. I just think Beautiful Thief, if she gets the break that Noah and I are thinking, I think she's going to be pretty tough in this race. Could be gone in the first couple steps. Charlie, Noah and I, obviously everyone has the 3 in there. Both the 5 and the 3 make a whole ton of sense, but the 3 you edge over the 5 in this race. What'd you like more about Heart of the Night than others in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you kind of just look at it more straightforward, it kind of makes more sense to go with the 5 in the aspect that this horse, second time out to take the step forward. But I decided I wanted to take a chance and go with, the veteran in the maiden rankings who's already had 6 tries. I understand, obviously this horse hasn't gotten it done yet. But for me, the big thing that I key in on is if you look at the last 2 races off the trainer switch at this distance is when you really saw that improvement. Now, yes, this could very well just be a horse where that's just the best she's going to get and she can't get the job done. But for me, I think this 5 is going to end up going off as a huge favorite at like even money 4 to 5. And I think this 3 will float up a little bit closer to 5 to 2, 3 to 1 because people, it's not major connections. And I think people will be scared off of that. And you know what? These turf sprints at the end of the day are so damn unpredictable. And so for me, it's a 2-horse race. And if I can pick between a 4 to 5 even money or a 5 to 2, 3 to 1 horse in a race this wide open, I'd rather take a chance and hope that this is the time. Maybe for Heart of the Night and the closing race of the night gets the job done.
I like the fact. I know. I got it. Shut up. I just blew my nose. I apologize. Heart of the Night is one that I think if the 5 does break, the Heart of the Night could sit off, and if Heart of the Night does the same type of thing, goes a little bit too fast up front, I think Heart of the Night, obviously, just morning line odds is the most likely second winner in this race. So definitely makes a ton of sense. Maybe 7th time is the charm for this daughter of City of Light. Last horse we'll talk about, and then we'll move into best bets. And then we have Jim Miller from Hawthorne Racecourse, of course, coming on to talk about their feature races tomorrow as Hawthorne now runs Thursday and Sunday. The number 6, Naughty Destiny, Christophe Clement. Now he had 1 win for the longest time. Now he's gotten 2 in the past weekend. Maybe it's finally started time for Mr. Clement to heat up, and you have no better rider to do it with than Dylan Davis, who won another one today, winning, over 20% at a Saratoga meet that obviously has one of the best jockey colonies in the entire world at this point. This is one that's going to be coming from farther back, has ran in, routes and then short sprints, and now coming a little bit shorter. And people always discourage Pat. These horses that run at these short distances can't end up closing, but it almost seems like in the, in these 6 furlong races, she gets there and then kind of like backpedals a little bit like that last race. Maybe 5.5 is just what she wants to do. And hopefully if the, horses like the 5 and the 3 break, she should get a decent amount of pace on.
Yeah. And I mean, Christophe Clement, like you hit on, starting to heat up a little bit, was ice cold. I don't think he puts this horse in, one of the New York Stallion Series races if, he doesn't think she has something there. So, listen, I don't know. I mean, this 5 could easily just wire the field, and the 6 just does no running that it hasn't done in the past. But I'll give her a chance. And hopefully, Dylan Davis with that insane ROI right now, it's just incredible, can keep it up.
Yeah. I mean, look, like I said, he's 3 for 40, but Dylan Davis, I think, is like, it's insane how much ahead he is on ROI than everyone else. Like Flavian Pratt obviously always gets bet as one, Pratt and NYRA have won more races than Dylan Davis, but Dylan Davis is up like $8 in the ROI column or something absolutely ridiculous. So, like I said, no better jockey to do it with than hopefully Clement can start getting a little few more wins under his belt, which is, it's not like him winning just 7%, being that he is, that 21% trainer so far this year. Barefoot Disco is a horse that was brought up in the chat. This will be the last one. Then we'll get into best bets. And then, of course, move on to Hawthorne, as I mentioned. Barefoot Disco is a horse that was not backed first time out. Dylan Davis got him all the way up to 3rd last year at Saratoga. Now came back this year at Saratoga. Ran an okay race, maybe needed one against the perennial second placer Geopolitics. Now comes into this spot. Maybe there will be enough pace on, but what I'm, like I was saying, kind of mentioned with the 6, I don't see necessarily too much pace in this race, but can continue to develop, especially with some of these first-time starters. If they go, Barefoot Disco is definitely one that will be closing late with Flavian Pratt. Again, as I said earlier, you don't want anyone else on your horse coming from the back on the turf. I'm going 5-3-8. Pat's going 6-5-3. Charlie's going 3-5-8. Noah's going 5-8-3. Guys, let's switch over to best bets here. Patrick and Noah both hinted a little bit at theirs earlier, but we'll go through. Patrick, you will go first. Win number 9, or race 9, a win place on number 5, Spaladay. Talked about it enough. You guys love that horse on top at a really nice price of 15-1 on the morning line. Race number 10, also 7-6-6-7 Dutch Exacta. That is in the Alabama. Candide and Miss Justify. Pat, talk about your best bets.
Yeah, listen, Spaladay, gonna have to improve, but I think this horse is gonna run very big, and is due for one of those to get a graded stakes win. And then in the Alabama, listen, Candide, I think, is obviously the horse to beat. But Miss Justify, that last race was really impressive. Coming up the rail with Pratt aboard. So I think I'm gonna try and get that horse, a Pletcher Exacta, home in the Alabama and see. I think he's won that race a couple times, Todd Pletcher, and see if I can get an Exacta home there. And I'll play like Dutch Exactas. But yeah, it's a fun card. Hopefully the weather holds up, and it'll be some a good betting day.
I completely agree with you. Obviously, if Spaladay gets home for 2 of the people on the screen, that will definitely be a top betting day. Pat, good luck with your best bets. Charlie going next, race number 9, an Exacta 7 over 10-11. That is, of course, in the Lake Placid, going with She Feels Pretty. I almost said More Than Looks. That is not the same horse, but they basically are the same in my mind. She Feels Pretty over Dynamic Pricing and the Appleby Euro Beautiful Love. And in race number 11, which is the starter allowance race, an Exacta again going 7 over 3-4, Unlimited Potential over Yo Daddy and Who's the King. Charlie, talk about your best bets.
Yeah, again, I know we've kind of all touched on in race 9, which is a terrific race. It could be very wide open. I think we all would agree. If it's not She Feels Pretty, you can make an argument for about 6 or 7 different horses. The reality for me is I think it is She Feels Pretty. I think even though it's a very talented field, and we've talked about how exciting of a race it can be, and I still think it will be. I think at the end of the day, personally, as long as She Feels Pretty shows up as herself, it's just going to be everybody else is fighting for second. Admittedly, again, I vertically on its complete own wouldn't want to use the 11 because I think, as you guys touched on, the horse will likely be over bet because it's a Godolphin with Appleby. However, I do think in the Exactas, in a race with this many horses and this wide open underneath, I think no second choice will be shorter than 7-2 or 4-1, which because of that means an Exacta under She Feels Pretty would pay nice. And then, as you touched on to a T, if you talk about dynamic pricing in this race, literally is the perfect horse to use underneath in this race. Just screams a horse that's going to be flying late but doesn't have enough pace to win. And I know that hurts Kyle because you love that horse to win, but I think also when you put biases aside, you could acknowledge is an ultra consistent horse that could run in the money. So went with those 2 underneath. And then in the next one, I know it was likely just in part a freak performance because of the horse taking a crazy drop down because Napoli just wanted to see one go down. And I get it. Sometimes you just got to try to go for an easy fast break layup just to see one go in. But I think the reality is the horse did still run, it was a hot pace and the horse still did romp going away. Showed some really nice speed. And I think, honestly, again, I don't think with these new connections, we'll go off as the favorite. So if I can get this one to replicate that performance and get one of the other two we touched on underneath, we could get a decent price. Yep. And I also just think that, again, as I touched on earlier, in some of those higher up maiden races that the horse ran in has shown figures like that before. So I don't know if it's a fluke for sure or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, he could easily win. It's obviously going to have to show that he can do it above a 16 claimer like dropped down to last time. But again, completely agree. If he gets out to the lead, especially like that, he could easily win for sure. Charlie, good luck with your best bets. Noah, going to you. Pick 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, starting race number 7 with 6, 9, 10, singling the aforementioned Spaladay at 15 to 1 on the morning line, and a race number 11 to win on number 3, Yo Daddy.
I think Spaladay is like 12 to 1 on the morning line, but with the pick digits. 3, I'm gonna try to turn that 12 to 1 into about 120 to 1. And I did it ending with Spaladay just because I don't really love Alabama as a betting race. So I actually went with one of the races that we didn't cover, which Charlie and I love to do on this show. Race 7 is a complete bog. I have no idea. I've got 5 horses, and I think I need to add like 2 or 3 more. But I had to cut it down to those 5. And then in race 8, 6, 9, 10 were the top 3. Even though I don't love the 9, which is the Donegal horse for Pletcher and NYRA, I'm still going to use him. And then into Spaladay, everything we touched on, Pat and I. And then moving on to race 11, I actually did a win bet on Yo Daddy instead of the Who's Yo Daddy Exacta, which I think in retrospect, I would change that. But those are my 2 best bets.
Like I said, I love it. Good luck with your best bets, Noah. And obviously, if Spaladay gets home, that'll be a fantastic pick 3. Obviously, as long as the other 2 legs get home as well. Charlie, you kind of touched on it already, man. Top part of the Sharita, the 2 fan clubs going against each other in dynamic pricing, and the Sharita Vo fan club and She Feels Pretty. I just think She Feels Pretty gets the jump, as we talked about before. Easy exact to 7 over 10 for me. Obviously, you can add others underneath in that race as well. Like I said, I'm trying to play against the 11. Think she might have too much to do. Obviously, Spaladay would be a fantastic candidate in second and would, inherently bring enough value into that exacta where you could play both a 7-5 and a 7-10. So I think that's actually what I'll probably go with. I think because those are my top 3 anyway. So I think I'll go 7 over 5-10. I think that makes the most sense in that race. And then into the next race, starting in race number 7, of course, She Feels Pretty going into the next race, which is the Alabama, trying to beat Candide in that spot with horses that might get a little bit of a jump on her. The Just Basking, who Noah talked about, that I wanted to kind of, was thinking about switching with the number 2 Chattelis. I don't think Chattelis is a win candidate in that race by any means. Maybe sticks in for a piece of the money, but Just Basking is definitely a win threat in that race. Then going with the number 6, my top pick, Miss Justify, to hopefully beat Candide and inject a little bit of value into that double. But that'll be, of course, it for Saratoga. But don't go anywhere, guys, of course, as we have 3 great races to talk about with the man who does it all, the director of racing at Hawthorne Racecourse. I see the smile, so I know you can hear me. Jim Miller. Jim, what's going on, my friend?
Not much. Yeah, getting ready, hoping the rain stays away for tomorrow's card. Definitely a good card for racing at Hawthorne. So looking forward to that. But it's been a busy week for us here in Illinois between racing at the Illinois State Fairs on the harness end and thoroughbreds at Hawthorne. So a lot of driving lately, Kyle.
No, trust me. I completely get it. Boys, of course, we'll let you go here. Thanks, guys, for joining the show. Greatly appreciate it. Patrick, go get in bed, my friend. I'll talk to you boys later. All right, Jim, let's get her going. I was going to ask you, obviously those that don't know, you also manage the racing and part of the racing over at the Illinois State Fair, where they do the harness every year. So I was going to ask, how'd that go through the weekend, to see if you had any good stories to tell, and then we'll get into the 3 races we'll cover at Hawthorne, which are 5, 7, and 9 tomorrow.
Well, we cram races into a very short period of time, and it's a lot of racing. So we opened things up with 17 races last week on Thursday with a split card, followed it up with 15 on Friday, 11 Saturday, and then came back today with 20 of them. So, drove to Springfield this morning, worked the 20 race card. drove back home to get Hawthorne's entries done for Sunday. And then I'll be driving back down bright and early tomorrow morning. And then depending on weather, heading back to Hawthorne for the afternoon. So a lot of miles on the car, not a whole lot of sleep, my friend.
That I can get it. That's for sure. Man, that's like I said, Jim, you do it all, as I always joke at Hawthorne. And man, you talk about doing it all. You're working a double shift tomorrow, for Christ's sake. You're doing the state fair, then back to Hawthorne.
I'm doing almost every job at the fair for us. I serve as the general manager, paddock judge, placing judge, and a steward. So they definitely keep me busy down there. Yes. But hey, that's right. It's really good racing on the harness end of things tomorrow. So hopefully it doesn't get washed out.
No, hopefully not. And obviously the 20 race card is great. And that drive to Springfield, Jim, obviously, that's not close. So I mean, that's a good 3 hours plus, obviously. So like I said, Jim, obviously very happy. I'm sure they all appreciate what you're doing down there. But Jim, let's talk about this card for tomorrow at Hawthorne. You mentioned the stuff about the weather. There is supposed to be light showers tonight and going into rain possibly tomorrow. There is a possibility. It's only like 50% or something like that for tomorrow. So hopefully stuff stays away. And maybe it even comes back after the card because it's debating, afternoon and evening. So obviously hoping with the rain staying away, but with 3 nice turf races carded or 4 nice turf races carded, for tomorrow. 3 of them we'll talk about here today. That's obviously the hope, but that'll obviously hopefully the races will still stay together if they do go off the turf.
And one of the good thing is the turf's been very firm of late, so it can actually handle a lot of rain. And if we do get a shower that passes through, it probably won't take these races off the turf, which is why I picked these 3 races to look at for tomorrow's card. But fingers crossed, it's either just misses us completely or just becomes a little bit of a passing shower, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jim, I'll put your picks on the bottom side of the screen. Obviously, Jim also writes the morning lines for Hawthorne Racecourse. So the great thing I love to do on this show is compare what he writes for the morning lines versus what he actually picks. Of course, morning lines being what he thinks the public is going to be betting versus his actual top picks. And I'm pulling up the morning lines right now, considering that if Equibase ever wants, to load for me, that's a usual thing.
What do we have here? Somebody said move the Arlington Million to Hawthorne as a comment. Unfortunately, that's their race. It's the rights to Churchill Downs, so we can't move the Arlington Million over to Hawthorne, which is one of the things that's unfortunate. It looks like Kyle froze too, so let's see if Kyle comes back with us. This could be a lot of fun. If he didn't, then Howard will jump in, which is amazing.
Hey, what's up, Jim? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I like this that Kyle's frozen. I think it's absolutely amazing, Howard. So, but yeah. So anyway, so right at the wire posted a comment there, Howard, and I saw that. I said, move the Arlington Million to Hawthorne. So Arlington, when Churchill Downs purchased Arlington Park, that race became the property of Churchill Downs, and they moved it to Churchill Downs briefly. Then they moved it over to Colonial, which was just conducted this past weekend there. It's a race with a lot of history. I started my racing career at Arlington Park, and I've seen some very good horses that have come through running there. So, yeah, it's been very interesting. But Howard here, I'm going to run everybody through race number 5. Will you go to pull up maybe Equibase there? But
all right,
looking at race number 5, yeah, it's a turf allowance, 5.5 furlongs on the turf, field of 8. The horse I laid as the morning line favorite was the 4. It's a horse named Swift As I Am from the barn of trainer Tanner Tracy. This is one of those that he had in at Hawthorne earlier in the year, brought to Prairie Meadows, comes back to Hawthorne. I left it out here. I did lay as a 9-5 favorite just because the horse has posted some big numbers, especially in that turf sprint 2 starts back. It was a good second place effort there. Jareth Loveberry does pick up the call, but just coming in off a little bit of a layoff. I thought I could beat that one. So Arthurian, the 7, is the horse that I went to. This is a horse that ran a really good race in that start back on June the 8th, the 7 horse Arthurian. God. This is amazing that Kyle just jumped back in. Kyle, don't worry about it. We got the show covered for you, buddy.
My internet just
Kyle,
died.
I got your back, Matt. I got your back, man. It's all good.
Honestly, Howard, I really appreciate that. My internet just completely died. I was ready to jump on my phone. I had my AirPods in and everything.
Your ass just got lucky that I got home from my extremely long day early enough to jump on. Hey, Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt your flow.
Yeah.
The main reason I want to come on now that Kyle's back.
My apologies.
And I'm sorry for interrupting the show here, guys. I just want to thank you personally, Jim, in front of everyone. I sent you an email, but I want to thank you for allowing me to come on the simulcast and sub in for you, which is really damn hard to do because there's only one Jim Miller. But Emily and I rocked it out. I think we did a great job. Our chemistry was fantastic. We gave a lot of winners. Emily had a 40-1 shot that finished a good second.
Nice.
I had a 10-1 over an 8-1 exacta with some other winners. So anyway, we had a few losses too, of course, but the show went well. Just appreciate yourself, John Walsh, Dakota, everyone there at Hawthorne for giving me an opportunity to come on the simulcast feed again. I just appreciate it.
Well, just giving out good info, that's kind of the key, and that's what we want. So I want to thank you as well for coming in, subbing for me. Yeah, at one of those very long days down at Springfield. It was the day that the first card started at 11 a.m. and the second card ended at about 8 p.m. So
yeah,
it was busy for sure, but hey, that's okay. I don't know where I'm going to end up being tomorrow based on weather. So we'll see how things unfold. I think I might actually be splitting between two places, so that'll be just fine.
Those are Kyle, you got the PPs up now? I can
We're
take
good.
them down. Okay.
We're good to go.
Hey, but before I'm just one other thing before you leave. If things are on turf tomorrow, and I hope they are, all my picks, Jim, of course, are up on the website. People can check it out. There's a horse in the last race, if they stay on turf, at 10-1 that I'm very interested in. I'm trying to find it right now on my picks. Yes, horse. Ricky's Best. The number 2, Ricky's Best, in a maiden 20 claimer. This horse is bred top and bottom for turf. I have no idea if he can run well on turf. He hasn't done much on dirt, but he's been in maiden special. Drops down, bred, like I said, for the grass. And I think it's very interesting in a race, Jim. I don't know how you feel. I'm sure you'll talk about it. In a race where the horses that run on turf are just very mad to me and haven't done much. So the number 2, you see it on screen right now. I didn't mean to leave it on screen. There we go. The number 2, Ricky's Best, in race 9 tomorrow, if it's on turf. I'll let you guys go. Thanks a lot, Jim. Great to see you. Kyle, glad you're back safely from Vegas. I heard you had a good time from the rumor has it.
So rumor has it, something like that. Yeah. I think my earliest bedtime was 4:30 in the morning. So we definitely had a fun time. That's for sure.
Do you remember like when we were in our mid-20s? I don't know if you can remember that long ago like me, but I don't think I could do that anymore. In fact, I know I can't.
That's the time I hit the road to drive down to Springfield this morning.
Oh, man. I'll let you guys go. Thanks.
All right,
you're good.
You got it.
Thanks, Howard. Man, apologies, Jim. I won't sugarcoat. What a shit show, to be honest.
No, but the cool thing was there was a good comment that had actually come up at the time that I got to answer. Just they were asking about the Arlington Million at Hawthorne. So it was one of those things. You did have an epic freeze there, though, on the screen. So that was pretty cool, Kyle. I'm
sure I did. I was sprinting around. I'm yelling at Emma. I'm like, the internet went out. What the heck is going on? I'm screaming.
All right, so shoot it over to race number 5, and we're going to look at the 7-horse Arthurian here. This is a horse from the barn of Cody Rosine that Cody was real high on wanting to get the horse onto the turf. And the horse ran a big race on the grass back on June the 8th. That was a race where the horse kind of had to wait, bide their time, and actually moved along the rail where most horses are closing kind of down the center of the lane. So that was a solid effort. The next start came off the turf and the horse never really fired. But then the most recent effort was a really good race as well, too. And I think Arthurian's just going to be sitting on a big spot here, back to the grass, 5.5 furlongs. So you get that full run of the backside, full run of the stretch. And I think you're going to get the 4-1 because the 4, Swift as I Am, will take a lot of action there at 9 to 5 in the morning line.
Yeah. And obviously the one start on turf I thought was really impressive that day. And it's, basically like, except, if you go very far back, like early 2023, definitely one of the best races of this horse, and this horse, and like you said, Cody's always been trying to get this horse on turf. Obviously those last 2 carted off the turf or taken off the turf due to rain, but hopefully coming back to the turf, this should be the time to get this horse at a decent price.
Yeah, definitely at a decent price. A couple of others that's interesting. The 6, Richie's on a roll. It looks basically just like a dirt horse. I almost wondered if they entered with the hopes that this race came off the grass. Yeah. They've run once on the turf, though. It was a second-place effort, but the number was not any good. So that's kind of my guess there with Richie's on a roll. And then the 3, Congrats on 50, is the other one that I think merits a look. And this is a horse I think turf, dirt doesn't really matter. I think they stay in either way. And I think that horse should run a pretty big race. So some chances to upset the favorite there in race number 5.
No, absolutely. And obviously Swift as I Am is that aforementioned favorite who has ran very good numbers, at fairgrounds, but hasn't been seen since April, 27th, where he ran at Fonner Park and got, first. I agree with you completely. The numbers are obviously there, but this is kind of like a where has this horse been, almost like ouchy type of look for this type of horse. So I think Arthurian definitely is wearing a ton of merit for a horse that looks like he's going to do exactly what the favorite's going to do. And if he's just, continuously getting better, I definitely want a horse like Arthurian at 4 times the price than the
and you're going to get that price, I think, because they will look at the numbers on the Tanner Tracy horse, and people are just going to not be able to overlook that, and that horse should take a good amount of action. So see if maybe we can catch a little bit of a price on Arthurian and get a double-digit winner there in race number 5.
Absolutely, my friend. Let's keep going. Let's move on to race number 7 here. This is a 5.5 furlong maiden special weight, draws a field of 9, and good to see some Illinois breds coming in. Of course, as you'll see, the morning line favorite is one of those aforementioned Illinois breds. Number 2, Crossana for Luis Colon and Chris Block at 5-2. Second choice is Mischief Lily for Orlando Mojica and Robert Dobbs. Third choice on the morning line, number 7, Deal 'em and Weep, Jareth Loveberry rides for Chris Block, the other Chris Block in this race. And then you can see on the bottom of the screen, you're also going against the grain again, but for a very well-known Midwest trainer in Louis Roussel.
Yeah, and this is one of those at 10-1 with Drama Queenie for Louis Roussel. Just you look at Crossana. Crossana's run 2 good races, but they were both going around 2 turns, and you're shortening up to 5.5 here. Numbers-wise, definitely figure for Crossana. I just tend to worry about that shortening back in distance for a horse that's probably going to have to come from off the pace. So everything would have to work out really well. But when you go to Drama Queenie's last start, in that debut, and that was last August, but the horse took some action, sent off at 7-1 in that spot. But what I like is the horse showed speed early on, contended in a lane before giving way. And it wouldn't surprise me if the horse bled in that start. And being a 2-year-old, you had to wait till you turned 3 to be able to add Lasix. But you look at the workout pattern, it's consistent. It's about every 10 days. They're good works. They're quick works. You get a gate drill on July the 26th that was really speedy in 47-1. And you look up and down this field, and there's really not a whole lot of pace in the race. So if the rain happens to miss, a firm turf course at Hawthorne really plays the speed. So addition of Lasix, speed. Felix has ridden the turf course very well. I just think things line up for a chance to pull off an upset. I think this horse will be a solid price off a 3 buyer figure in that debut.
I was going to say that's a generally a very nice angle we like to put on the show. We used to call it the 0 buyer angle, but the 3 buyer angle is basically about there.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you talk about these 2-year. The one thing I always like to talk about is these 2-year-old races. They try them once out at 2, and then they run, a 3 buyer, and you're like, okay, maybe she's not as ready as we thought she was. Give her some time off. But again, you talked about it. These consistent works. And Louis Roussel is not usually one to have, cranked works like that. And you see one of his drill a gate breeze in 47. I mean, that's quick, especially out of his barn. So definitely one to look forward to. And if you're getting, double digits on a horse like this, which you most likely should when we look down the field, starting with, of course, Mischief Lily, I think Drama Queenie definitely could have a shot in this one.
Yeah, and I would think so too. And the thing about Mischief Lily is it's a lot of consistent races, but a lot of opportunities to break that maiden. Hasn't done so yet in 13 starts. And again, it's another one that's been going a route of ground, and now you're shortening back up to the sprint. So I tend to wonder what you're going to see sprint-wise. But this could just be another race where people look on paper and see speed figures, they see turf, and say, okay, Mischief Lily and Crossana are absolute standouts. I don't have to look any further. I think there is the potential to look further there and find a price definitely in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing that you look at like this, and for a horse like Mischief Lily, like you said, it's over 13. Granted, has run some good races at a route of ground, but then it almost like seems to me in this race, it's almost like, she's done well at a route of ground, just hasn't been able to get there with that late punch. Let's try something, let's try and shorten her up. Not necessarily, maybe a pointed 2 spot, which is something, like Louis Roussel is doing with Drama Queenie. That's kind of the way I like to approach it, especially when you see these horses that have not gotten off the block yet. And, especially double digit starts. And now they're trying something basically completely different.
Well, and the thing too, and at Horseshoe Indianapolis, I mean, if you're not Indiana bred, it can be hard to find a race like this on the turf because a lot of those Indiana bred maidens are running those turf sprints. So this horse being Kentucky bred, you see just the 1 start at Horseshoe Indianapolis this year. They're finding an opportunity to race. Rob Dobbs used to race in Chicago all the time, and then he was a longtime assistant for Christine Jenks when she was training here. So he's based in Indiana, but it's not that far of a drive. Comes over here, gets a shot to run, and definitely going to be in the mix. I just think they're probably going to be running on a little bit too late.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Same kind of thing with Crossana. You talked about there not being too much speed in here. This is one that you already touched on. Gonna need some pace to run into. And there's other horses in this race. I mean, like Deal 'em and Weep, it was kind of like the type of stalking trip. Tried him on the dirt last time, didn't get to do anything, but this should be another one, especially with Loveberry taking them out. That's going to take some money as well.
Yeah, and that horse is going to be turf only. If they come off the turf, that horse will scratch. So we'll see how things unfold. But just with nobody else to show speed, maybe the outside horse, the 9, goes. But if Drama Queenie is right, Drama Queenie is going to be loose and lonely on the lead. And I think that's the key. And if this horse shakes loose, they may be gone.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you by any means. And again, great price of 10-1 looking there on Drama Queenie. Let's move on to the last race, race number 9. That aforementioned race by Howard, that 20,000 maiden claimer, where he likes the number 2, Ricky's Best, with Rachel Slavinsky, who's had a great start to her career at Hawthorne Racecourse, carrying the 7-pound allowance. You are going a different route, going with the number 9 in this race, and it's a field of 11, and I'll show the picks right now. I'll show the field right now. Field of 11. Morning line favorite is that number 9, Giano, for Olaf Hernandez and Antonio Moraz. Second choice, go the inside, number 6, Io Fedro, for I think it's why is it Franklin Reyes?
Frank Reyes. Frank Reyes.
Okay. I was like, why am I drawing a blank? Chris Block, of course, trains. And number 11, all the way to the outside, the third choice, All About Tonight, for Chris Amy and Eduardo Rodriguez. You are going with that aforementioned morning line favorite, Jim. And in this race, obviously these main 20s have the tendency to bring out, that type of really weird stuff. But the speed figures on Giano definitely are in the mix for the win easily.
And they're in the mix, but this is a weird race. It's kind of the horse I landed on, but if I was playing a multi-race wager, I would probably spread and go 4 or 5 deep in here. Giano's just kind of that consistent racehorse. You see 7 starts, 4 times on the board, claim from Ravelli, back in for the $20,000 price tag, the level from where they got claimed. I thought that was kind of the key. And it's a horse that I think you can kind of rely on if they're on turf or if they're on dirt. So looking at that with Giano was the reason that I landed on that horse. The one that's probably the most intriguing to me at a price is the 5 horse in here, and that's Black Russian. Horse that's really long overdue for the maiden breaker. But this is a horse that's been a much different racehorse over the course of those last 4 starts. You just see they're kind of starting to figure things out a little bit. It wasn't a bad turf effort back on May the 25th. Last 3 starts were pretty good. It's coordinated with getting the bug in the saddle and Rachel Slavinsky. Now, you don't get Slavinsky aboard, but you do get the bug with Rashawn Blotch in the saddle. So we'll see how Black Russian runs, but this is a horse that I think rates back a little bit, comes running at him late. I'm expecting a decent amount of pace in this race to run at too. So if you're looking for a little bit of a price, a horse like Black Russian may be in the mix. And then if the race does come off the turf, look at the 10 Skyline. Skyline's a horse that I think that's kind of their goal. I mean, you've seen the recent races they've entered, and races come off the turf, they stay in, and they've run some decent races. The horse ran a good second. It was only 4 horse field in that last out, but you see back-to-back seconds in there. But again, I think you're going to get a decent price in this race. So it probably starts with Giano, but Howard's horse is in the mix. Io Fedro, All About Tonight. You would definitely have to spread in here if you're playing the late pick 5 or the late pick 4.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, this was always, my dad was always one that used to joke that last race at Arlington or Hawthorne is always the one where you can find a price in this race. And, these maiden 20s definitely have the part where, they have the tendency to produce that type of horse in this last race, whether it's the turf mile going maiden 20 or the old turf sprint last race, as we just covered at Saratoga. It's always these turf races definitely have the tendency to produce something large. And, I love when you pair it with type of like a pace angle, like Giano, hasn't been able to necessarily get the job done yet, but has that type of stalking trip with not a whole lot of pace to run, into. Maybe a horse like Giano is more favorited over someone like, the 10 who's going to be coming from back, or the 5 Black Russian is going to be, closing late as well.
Yeah, and it's something, definitely watch the weather too. This is the first day of a new lane. We moved from the inside lane out to 10 feet, so you have a fresh running path for all the racehorses there. Changes kind of the turns a little bit, makes them a little bit tighter there, kind of makes that stretch just a little bit longer. But again, when it's dry and it's firm, it's been very much a front-end course. You have to be either on or within just a couple of lengths of the lead turning for home. You've seen horses that look like they're going to be gobbled up on the lead into the stretch, and then all of a sudden they just find a little bit more and run on late. So definitely worth watching. But with 4 races on the grass and having an earlier turf race, it's a nice way to set things up before the late pick 4 and late pick 5.
No, absolutely. And that's like I said, you obviously card everything, you do all that. So I like that you have, that turf course to kind of get into. If you're looking to bet the late pick 4, late pick 5, you can kind of take that race. Obviously, it's not, the gospel by any means, right? But, you can kind of use that as a little bit of information to be able to take with you into that late pick 5. One quick, as our good friend Matt Miller, and then we'll end the show, Jim, of course. Jim Miller, same pedestal as Nick Tamaro when it comes to giving truly insightful advice on horses they know extremely well. This stuff is gold, people. And,
Thank you, sir.
It's that type of, obviously, Nick Tamaro, he's the caller for Sam Houston, and, same type of way, right? He sees these horses all the time. So, not necessarily just looking at it on paper. Obviously, you watch these horses in the morning, you watch, all the time. So the fact that you can come on and give these people exactly what you see every single day, I think is the thing that definitely needs to be looked at more.
Well, and that's the most important thing for everybody. I mean, you remember it's pari-mutuel race wagering. So Hawthorne, we don't care. We get ours off the top, and then it's all the people playing against one another. And with the 12% takeout, it's more money into the bettors' pocket. So you just want to supply information so the bettors can go out there and win. You want to have a good time, of course, at the races and come back and play the races once again. So that's my whole goal. Provide information that can help you and then make you make those determinations for how you want to wager your money.
Yep. And that's why they said, Jim, that's why everyone loves when you come on, because they love to hear the exact information that they want to hear. And Jim, like I said, thanks so much for joining the show as always, man. Greatly appreciate it, especially after the long day. And hopefully everything continues to go well with that schedule tomorrow, my friend. And hopefully, as like I said, after the Illinois Fair gets done, you can return to at least a little bit of normalcy for you guys. But thank you guys all so much for watching this podcast, episode 95 of Bettin N Boozin, covering Alabama Stakes Day at Saratoga, and episode 90. And the late and 3 races at Hawthorne tomorrow. I'm a little flustered from that.
It's that freeze, man. It got you.
I know. It might be a brain freeze at this point. I'm not too sure. But for Jim Miller, for my co-hosts Noah Maher, Patrick Kunzel, and Charlie Freeman, this has been your host Kyle Roscoe, in episode 95 of Bettin N Boozin here on the HHH Racing Podcast. And until next time, everybody, crush those bets, win those photos, and stay safe, everyone. We'll see you in the next one. Have a good night.